long, you know that I tend to talk about two things: content marketing and sales marketing alignment. The best part for me is that I'm a bit of a marketing technology geek, which allows me to tie all those things together. From creative to sales to marketing, no matter which business team you're on, your end goal is to figure out who to sell to, how to engage with them, how to get them to buy, and if you're smart, how to get them to buy again. And to do that today, you need to have careful consideration of your sales and marketing technology. And today's guest is an entrepreneur behind several of the leading technologies in marketing. My guest today is a marketing entrepreneur and a thought leader. He's currently the Chief Marketing and Product Officer at Demandbase, the leading account-based marketing platform. Previously, he was the CEO and founder of Engagio, which was acquired by Demandbase, and he was a co-founder at Marketo, a leader in marketing automation, which was acquired by Adobe. He's a frequent speaker at conferences including Dreamforce, Marketing Props B2B, and the Marketing Nation Summit. He's written the Complete and Clear Guide to Account-Based Marketing and the Definitive Guide to Marketing Automation. Therefore, it is my absolute honor to welcome to the podcast, Jon Miller. Hi, Jon.
Howdy. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the very kind introduction.
Definitely. It's my pleasure to have you take your time out of your day to have a conversation with me. Jon, I've studied, I've shortlisted, I've purchased, and I've used so many of the platforms that you've been a part of creating that I almost don't even know where to start. So can you give us a quick journey through some of the companies that you've helped develop?
Sure. I mean, I like to sort of go all the way back. I actually studied physics for my undergraduate and thought I'd go get a PhD in physics and go to academia. And I was like, I ended up deferring that PhD program for a year and just to try out the business world. At least I wanted to at least give it a shot. And I worked in management consulting, and I liked it. And the firm where I worked ended up buying an old mainframe-based marketing technology solution, and we spun that out as a company called Exchange. And if you're a real history of marketing technology, you might have heard of them. They were probably one of the leading marketing tech solutions of sort of the mid-90s. So fast forward a couple of years, I went to get my MBA. And when I was graduating, it was sort of the middle of the internet bubble, 1999, and everybody was going into tech. And, and I didn't have any tech experience at all, but I ended up getting a job at a company called Epiphany. And part of the reason I got that job is because they were building a product that was going to compete against Exchange. And the fact that I had even a loose connection there kind of was, enough to lock me into that role.
Great timing too.
And so that's what kind of really was my first job in marketing technology. I wasn't a founder, but I learned a lot. Epiphany went on to become probably the leading marketing tech of the internet bubble, and then kind of crashed down the other side. And we ended up selling Epiphany in 2005 to a company called SSA Global, which is now part of Infor. So when that happened, I decided to leave and try to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I had never really even thought about being an entrepreneur. I didn't come from that kind of family or anything. And, honestly, I had a pregnant wife and a mortgage and, I wasn't thinking, oh, let's go start a company. But I started talking with Phil Fernandez, who had been my boss's boss back at Epiphany. He was the president of Epiphany. And we both sort of kind of had a shared vision, actually, of an opportunity for a marketing technology, something that was really powerful like Epiphany had been, but that would be a lot easier to buy and easier to own and easier to use, and that we could really leverage software as a service to make that happen. And through those conversations, we ultimately decided to start a company together, which we ended up calling Marketo. And, as it wasn't the time in my life I thought I'd be starting a company, but the fact I was able to do it with Phil, I thought, really helped de-risk some of the situation for me. And, obviously, if you've been in marketing technology for a while, you probably have heard of Marketo.
It's an understatement for me.
That worked out well. And, we had an IPO. So as the company got really big, though, it stopped feeling like my baby. and it started feeling like a job.
Is that an entrepreneur pain?
Well, I didn't realize that, but once I did it once, I realized, hell, this entrepreneur thing is pretty good.
Yeah.
I wanted it again. Mm-hmm. And so after 9 years at Marketo, I decided to leave to start my own MarTech business, and this time try it out being the CEO myself. And I decided to enter into the account-based marketing space, partly because it was I could tell it was up and coming as a category, and partly because I'd been trying to do similar marketing things myself at Marketo, and I'd realized the challenges that I'd had, and that therefore there was opportunity for new technology solutions. So that's what ultimately led me to start Engagio in 2015. And that was a great experience. I mean, we built Engagio for 5 years, I think, to help define and redefine the ABM category. And then in 2020, partly during COVID, I started talking with the Demandbase team, and we really just saw a shared vision of the two platforms, the Demandbase platform plus the Engagio platform, coming together perfectly to create the ultimate platform, if you will. If there's any kind of 1980s cartoon geeks out there, we called it Project Voltron. Voltron was like these lions that would kind of come together, robot lions that would come together to form like a super robot. And so that's what we did when we merged Engagio and Demandbase together. And so that's what I've been up to for the last year and a half is bringing the platforms together and taking Demandbase to the next level.
Well, you definitely led into my question that I want to ask you as I listen to you. As I mentioned, currently you're the CMO and product officer at Demandbase, right?
That's right.
So, if I did a quick Google search just out of curiosity, and I found that, if I Google account-based marketing, I'll find that Demandbase is at the top of almost every list that I find. And you also may see Engagio on that list because the list hasn't been updated. And now Engagio is a part of Demandbase. So you have these two leaders. So as you mentioned before, they formed Voltron. So tell me about how some of these technologies that they both had and what some of the synergies are that made them form Voltron and be even stronger together.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting, good question. I mean, the whole idea of account-based marketing in general is you do very focused marketing on the best accounts so that you can stand out. Right. So instead of traditional marketing where you're just going to run a campaign or have a webinar and invite everybody, with account-based marketing, you're going to focus in on, hey, here's the specific accounts, the specific people I want. How am I going to attract and engage them? And so Demandbase, as a pioneer in that category, really started, I would say, almost with like a digital first approach to that strategy. So Demandbase has had technology that would help you identify which accounts you should be focusing on, both because they were in your ideal customer profile and also the ones that were kind of showing what's known as intent, the ones that are kind of hot because they're researching your category. That would sort of identify. And then Demandbase would help you attract those accounts by advertising to them. So if you're going to do advertising traditionally, that's very broad, and you just advertise, But with a tool like Demandbase, you can say, I only want my ads to show to these specific companies that are in my list, and then just show it to the specific people in those companies who are the ones who show interest in what I sell. So it's a very focused form of advertising. But then you drive them to your website, and then you can engage them by maybe creating a personalized website experience. Recognize, this is somebody from Dell on the site. That's one of my companies. Let me interact with them differently. And then you can measure if the whole thing's working by, did website traffic go up? When I started the whole, from the accounts that I care about.
Right.
So that was the Demandbase. So that kind of, identify, attract, engage, measure was a very digital first approach. Uh-huh. Engagio, as I said, I built Engagio to sort of solve the challenges that I'd had doing ABM myself at Marketo. And for me, we weren't doing any advertising. What we were trying to do is pick the accounts that were not engaging with us, proactively go after them with our sales teams, kind of hand in hand with sales, like SDR calls and sending them packages and so on. And then really wanted to measure, does all of this result in them just downloading more of my content and interacting more of my campaigns? So Engagio, we built much more of like a marketing automation oriented view of ABM, which pulled together all the data you had about the accounts, like who's opening your emails, which content are they downloading, which webinars are they attending. Use that to score the accounts so you could sort of know who's engaging and who's not engaging, and then alerting the sales teams and creating other automated workflows. So like you create like a segment of accounts and then push that into something like Outreach or Sales Loft so that your SDRs might follow up. Mm-hmm. So hopefully you can kind of see they're both in ABM, but what we were doing was so different. And then, if you looked at the analyst reports and when they describe Engagio, they'd say Engagio is really cool, but it doesn't have advertising. Mm-hmm. Right? And they'd go to Demandbase and Demandbase is really cool, but it doesn't have that integration with the first party data. And so by coming together, we were each able to get like 3 years worth of innovation and roadmap done in 5 months. And that's why it was one of those things where like it's rare. You have two companies that are competitors in an industry that the products were so different that they came together.
Well, I know it's in your rear view now, but it seems like, I was a Marketo user for a long time. And some of those elements you mentioned are attempted in Marketo. But, you mentioned too that, you have something that does it, but there's parts missing. So I guess the parts missing are what you were looking for. And rather than trying to develop them where you were at, you just developed your own thing. Is that what basically happened?
Yeah, put simply, Marketo does things like scoring and segmenting, but it's really all about lists of people in Marketo.
List of people.
It's a person score and a list of people. And what I didn't have was the ability to sort of do similar things, but at the account level. And that was, that's an oversimplification, but that's a big part of the difference.
That does explain it clearly, though. That's where we're getting towards account versus people. And that's, I think, one of the biggest hangups. One of the first steps of understanding ABM is getting past the typical traditional marketers used to marketing to people. And another thing I want to ask you about, too. So a traditional marketer who's used to marketing to people, they're also used to big numbers of database.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to introduce ABM to a marketing team, or when you're trying to sell ABM to a company, what kind of pushback do you get in terms of trying to educate them on stop worrying about the big numbers and worry about the quality of who you're communicating to?
Yeah. Where people really get into trouble is the metrics that they're using to measure their marketing. And a lot of marketing historically is measured in terms of quantity and not quality. Mm-hmm. And that can go bad, right? Vanity metrics like, this many people came to my website, or this many people attended my webinar. It's not all that interesting, actually, if it's not the right people.
Yeah.
So, in ABM in general, we're encouraging people to focus on quality as much or more than quantity. Is it the right meaningful reactions with the right people at the right companies? And marketers tend to get that in principle, right? Where it gets hard is if it affects their compensation, right?
Because their KPIs are based on those outdated things.
Yeah, if you're measured, even if you're not paid on it, but if you're measured on the number of MQLs, you're still going to go generate MQLs, marketing qualified leads. So it's really, do you, can you help convince the rest of your organization to take sort of this more strategic view of metrics that balance quantity and quality?
Well, let me ask you this. So marketers, in my opinion, are often not realizing the shifts in where a company's revenue is coming from. And we're so focused, and I'll say we because I'm a marketer myself, we're so focused on, and as you just mentioned, measured by some of the KPIs that are measuring the top of the funnel that we miss the opportunity to market to existing customers. And as a result, these organizations have the notion that these existing customers belong more to sales than they do to marketing. So, how can we resolve some of these outdated thoughts on what marketing owns versus, well, what marketing owns and what they should be measured by?
Honestly, I think first off, let me take some responsibility. I mean, I think part of the reason why marketing is that way is because of tools like Marketo and the things that I used to preach.
Mm,
Where like we live, not even on purpose, but there's a bias built into the market automation tools that focuses on new business.
mm,
When
mm.
you go into the reports in those tools, and it's sort of the success is new business opportunity was created.
Yeah.
And so I'm just saying there is an outdated overemphasis on the net new logo that's been in marketing for a while, and it's partly because of the way the tools worked. I think what needs to
So,
change.
go ahead. Mhm,
Sorry, what needs to change then is almost like how marketers think about how they work and how they work with sales.
mhm.
Is the mental model that sort of used to exist is kind of like a baton handoff. Marketing is going to generate a lead and they're going to hand it to a salesperson, who might close it, who then might hand it to a customer success person or something like that. And in this new world, I think it's much more like, a soccer team where you have forwards and fullbacks and mid strikers and people in different positions, but they pass the ball back and forth as you go, up and down the field. And so sometimes marketing's got the ball, sometimes sales got the ball.
I love that analogy because I've been using that, and I'm not even a big sports person, but I've been using it. I've been saying football or soccer because you may have two lines or two teams on the team, but it's still the same team. You don't have your offense fighting your defense. It's still the same team.
Yeah,
And during the game, different people have the ball.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so when you sort of, when you start to accept that a little bit, I think it opens up kind of new ways of thinking kind of what marketing should be doing and owning. And, maybe I'm not going to measure marketing only on how many net new leads, are created, but, are we influencing open opportunities, right? In terms of engaging people at those accounts, ultimately for the goal of maybe accelerating deals or improving win rates, and you met existing customers. I mean, now that so much business is subscription based, not just software as a service, but other industries too.
Mhm.
It's almost foolish for marketers not to be thinking about how are they going to kind of get more revenue from the existing customers, because that's frankly where most of it's going to kind of be coming from. But the metrics have to change, the org structures have to change, to sort of reflect that new reality.
So is this where, and you've spoken of this a lot and written about it, is this where the account-based experience concept comes in?
Yeah, definitely that's part of it. I mean, so yeah, we've been talking about account-based marketing. I was,
Mhm.
one of the pioneers of account-based marketing. And there's really two problems with account-based marketing, right? And the first one you just alluded to is the name itself. Has marketing in
Mhm.
the title. And it sort of suggests that it's just something that one department does, but that's not how we're going to be successful. So one of the I have sort of started to use this term account-based experience or ABX. One of the real advantages of that term is that it's a bigger tent that we can kind of bring these other departments into. The other reason I've been using account-based experience is because it has that word experience in it. And the best way to describe that is, I've used this analogy in the past where traditional demand generation is like fishing with a net. You don't care
Mhm.
who responds, you just care do you catch enough. Whereas account-based marketing, that's fishing with a spear, where you're going after the big guys kind of proactively.
Mhm.
And the problem with that, and that analogy served me well, but the problem with that definition of account-based marketing is ultimately it doesn't feel very good to get poked by a spear. And the way people are practicing ABM is they're calling and reaching out to these accounts just because they're interested in the account and not because that account is interested in them. And what I was trying to figure out is there a new model that kind of has the respect for the customer experience that traditional demand generation had, where we scored at people and we only called the leads when they were ready to talk to sales? And can we apply that sort of respect to the precision and targeting of the ABM world? And that's sort of why I was like, let's call that account-based experience.
I'm glad you have that phrase, and I'm gonna help you evangelize that phrase and give you full credit for it, obviously. But account-based experience, here's the two reasons why I'm gonna definitely want to get behind you on that phrase. One, it's because whenever you say the word marketing to a sales team, their ears turn off.
They don't like it.
So account-based marketing, you've already lost half your audience because the word marketing was whispered in the room. And then two, experience. I worked in the customer experience industry for several years as well. And now I'm seeing that there's a growing amount of, and we all know that customer experience, especially since we've been locked down the past year or two, the experience is so much more heightened in terms of the value of whether or not you do business with someone. What is your experience?
Yeah.
I'm an Amazon overuser because the experience is great. So as we bring marketing into the sales cycle, we bring experience to the sales cycle, I think account-based experience definitely pulls it all together and explains how we should move forward as an organization trying to sell something.
Cool. Glad. My new, so you mentioned at the intro, I wrote the Clear and Complete Guide to Account-Based Marketing. I've actually come out with a sequel, the Clear and Complete Guide to Account-Based Experience. And so that's, I'm pretty proud of it. I think it's my best book yet. You can get off the Demandbase site or you can throw it into the show notes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely put a link in the show notes to this as well. So if you're listening, you can find it in the show notes. So you mentioned a moment ago about the whole fishing with nets versus spears. And the company that I founded, Content Monster, is based on helping companies fish with nets through inbound content.
Yeah.
But recently, especially with the growth of our podcast services, we see more opportunities to help clients create more targeted outbound content towards the accounts that they want to work with. So what are some of the other creative ways that you've seen companies step into ABM?
Yeah, the core thing to just keep in mind in ABM, right, is, we're going after a smaller set of accounts, and so we need to raise our chances of success with each one. And when true of all marketing, we're not the only person who's trying to reach our target buyer. There's a whole bunch of other people also trying to reach that target buyer. And our buyers have gotten pretty good at kind of opting out and tuning out stuff that they don't want. So that's your rule of thumb for, I think, ABM content. How am I going to stand out in a crowded marketplace so that I can be more effective, increase my chances of success with this smaller, more valuable pool? And don't do that. Don't stand out in the crowded marketplace by being louder or noisier, right? Stand out in the crowded marketplace by being more useful, more relevant, more entertaining, more something.
So does an organization think about that when they're creating their content? Should they also, from an account-based situation, say, these accounts, I wouldn't say maybe this one, maybe so, you tell me, these accounts would prefer this kind of content, let's go create it and make sure they see it. Is that an approach?
Yeah, there's a spectrum, ultimately. And there's a spectrum usually based on the size or value of the account. Mm-hmm. Right? So on the one hand, imagine you're Accenture and you sell $500 million a year consulting contracts, to super large major organizations. Mm-hmm. You're probably going to create content just for that one organization, because it's worth it. you know, and you're probably going to even get more bespoke than that. You're going to be creating content for divisions and specific
Free
personas
gym.
within that, kind of organization.
Yeah.
So you can see that, kind of for the larger, most valuable accounts, truly bespoke, customized content.
Mm-hmm.
You take a step back from there. Maybe you're doing $500,000, 500K deals, or 300K deals. For that, maybe what you're going to do is you're going to create a micro segment. Let's find like 10 accounts that all have some similar business problem, and really create content that's highly targeted to that pool of 10 or 15 accounts. And then for each one of those, once you have that really highly targeted piece of content, you'll probably put their logo on the cover and write a customized first page, right? So each one kind of gets something custom like that. And then you move down, maybe accounts that are worth $100,000, maybe you'll just have broader, more generic content. But again, you stick their logo and name on the cover. So it's the clear and complete guide to account-based experience for Acme Corp. Here you go. And so again, I think it is about, there's no one or the other. It's a spectrum based on how valuable the account is, and therefore how much resource you can really put against each one.
And I'll say, as a content producer, to the listeners, the amount of resource it takes to personalize down to those accounts with technology, that resource cost is lower every day. If I think back to the beginning of my marketing career, personalizing may have meant some big folder with 30, 40 sheets printed up with their logo on it and their box and all this, to personalize for one particular account would have meant going back and forth to the printer and all this expense. Today, you could do a video or a podcast for less than what all that printing costs for one client. So I think there's definitely, like you said, there's definitely a range of how much effort you can put into each account or group of accounts. But it's important to know that the bar isn't as high as I think many companies think it is to create that content.
I want to build on, one of the other themes that I sort of like to talk about here is just the importance of what I call human content. If I take the time to record a video for you, it's going to stand out more, than something that's less generic, because there's a human connection. And when marketers are sending emails, if you're sending an email to 20,000 people, you're going to get a 0.2% response rate, and if you take the time to write a personal note to somebody, they're going to get a higher response rate.
Absolutely. I did a keynote called Be Content, which was basically showing people from ground level to executives how much more power there is in them being the content versus something that went through marketing and through a review board and all this different reviews versus just turning on the camera and being the content and speaking directly to your consumer, which is what we can do today because technology allows us to.
Yep.
Which leads me to a question about you personally, man. You create a lot of content. You are not camera shy. You do a lot of podcasts, a lot of video. So what would you say to other executives about how it's worked for you and why you even do it?
So, for me, it really sits at the core of that's how I believe it's the best way to build B2B brands. We talk about net fishing and spear fishing and all these other kind of revenue oriented demand generation things. And I don't think, I think modern marketers probably don't talk about brand enough, because the reality is I don't care how good your webinar is or your content is. If your company's brand isn't good, you're never going to have it be as successful. Whereas if you have a kick-ass brand, you can probably get by with sort of subpar content and programs, And so, how do you build? And brands matter because people are human and they have emotions, and brands are going to they get past the brain and go down to the reptilian brain, and that's where a lot of decisions get made, anyways. So, how do you build a brand, right? If you're a consumer company, if you're Coke, you can just have these very aspirational images of, when you drink this thing, you're going to feel awesome and refreshed and cool or whatever. In B2B, though, there's this asymmetry where a good decision makes your company better. A bad decision means you might lose your job. And so a lot of B2B branding tends to be about reducing that fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's about, is this a safe brand? Is this a trusted brand? Is this something that you can kind of bet your career on? And the classic example of that is nobody ever got fired for buying IBM.
Yeah.
Right? But if you're not IBM, what can you do? And I think one of the best things you can do to be a trusted and safe brand is to be seen as an expert. Because people trust experts, to be seen as a teacher. And so I spend so much time investing in content and education and things like that, because I believe that's how we can build a brand as a trusted advisor to the marketplace.
So as a leader in the organizations that you work with, maybe you have more freedom to create content. So how does an organization get past that nervousness of, and what level in the organization of people can create content?
Just in terms of like people feeling enabled, or like you are allowed to publish things under the company's name?
Yeah. How can a company enable, because they have this powerhouse of people who may be really passionate about the brand and want to talk about it. It could be their best brand ambassadors, but yet they may be fearful of the conservativeness of the company to actually do something or show something. So, are we at a place yet where companies can empower their employees to create content and feel safe about it?
Generally, I think they should. I'm not saying every company does, but they anywhere I'm going to be a leader is certainly going to, and I would encourage every marketing leader out there to kind of support that. I
Maybe
think
that's the answer. The leaders should be.
What's that?
So maybe that's the answer. Your leaders should be the content.
I think at least, I was going to say, if you're listening to this podcast and you work at a company where your leaders don't respect content and you believe that you can help create good content, it may not be the right company for you.
Good point. So I want to tell you too, as a side note, I love the Demandbase TV section of your website, and I'm absolutely going to use that as an example for my customers of how content should be leveraged. I love it. So how did that initiative come about, and how's it working out for you so far?
It's really the brainchild of my head of content, who's a guy named Jon Lieberman. Rewind enough years back, Jon was a reporter for the Howard Stern show. So,
I thought that name sounded familiar for some reason.
Might have heard of him from the Howard Stern show.
Yeah.
He also was a reporter who went to Iraq and reported on that kind of thing. So he eventually decided he wanted a career in tech, and he went to SAP, and he spent 10 years at SAP in their content team. But he'd always had a very video first approach to content. And so when I took over the CMO at Demandbase, one of the first things I was like, I need to hire a kick-ass head of content. And I interviewed all the usual suspects, and I tend to think about written content first myself more than video. But Jon Lieberman clearly stood out as this really interesting powerhouse who had such a strong point of view about video. So he's the guy. And he just came in and was like, we're starting a B2B streaming service. And we're going to produce 75 videos in 3 months and launch it. And I'm like, great, make it happen. And he did. So, and the funniest thing, the day we launched it, so our site's live at demandbase.com/dbtv. The day we launched it, one of our competitors announced their new streaming service. But more interestingly, Salesforce also announced their Salesforce Plus streaming service coming many months from now, or a month or two from now or something. So it does feel like this is a trend, and we just happen to have been first on it.
And I think a key point of that is hardly any of this stuff is gated, right? we can just go to the site and watch the content, right?
Oh yeah. None of the content on DBTV is gated because frankly, people don't want to fill out forms.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think the companies have had these web pages or websites with all this content. I found one yesterday where I could not watch a single video or white paper or anything else without a form. And I'm like, okay, I can't wait to consult with this company because this hurts to even see that this still exists.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I
try to be smart. I mean, if you want to download my book on our site, we ask for an email address, not a whole long form, but we're asking for an email. But then once you give us your email, we're not going to ever ask you for anything else again. And so I think, it is their trade-off because sometimes you do want to build your database.
Yeah, lead gen. That's true.
People don't want to fill out these long forms because they just know if they do that, a salesperson is going to start calling them and poking them with a spear.
I had a client call me once and said, I gained so much value from this video of yours. I had to call you and give you a shot at this business. And I didn't even know what video he was talking about because, we have hundreds of videos. But he just said he learned everything he needed to know, but he wasn't intending to do it. He just wanted to know about it. And so the video drove the business. And had I gated it, I'd have probably never heard of the guy.
I love it. It's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, I love, like I said, I'm going to use your site, DBTV, as a poster child for how a company should be a media company and show off their content and educate and guide their customers. I think it's a wonderful example. So before we go, Jon, I want to ask you a question, and I call this my get it off your chest question that I think that always brings quite a bit of insight to the listeners, especially those who are marketing and sales. And the question is, if there was one thing that you wish, let's go for marketers this time. If there was one thing you wish marketers knew today that would help them, what would it be?
Yeah, I kind of at my marketing team meeting, it was just last week, I kind of got on the soapbox and reminded them is team, never forget that even though we're in B2B and we're doing account-based marketing, that your prospects and customers are humans. And, there's so many implications of that. When you're writing an email, so often I look at the emails that people write and I'm like, is that how you would write a letter to a human? like a person you actually know or want to know? No, that's not how humans speak in written communications. So why do you think you have to write in this stilted way? Just because you're sending an email, for example, or when we wanted to send packages to our customers, yeah, sure, we could send hey, here's a Demandbase branded water bottle. Thank you for being a customer, right? But how much more powerful is it to get on the phone, and talk to them and realize that they're a cocktail aficionado, and send them a really interesting bottle of bitters. They'll remember that. They'll remember it. It doesn't cost anymore. It's just more human. And so there's just so many examples of I don't care what industry you're in, your buyers are humans and treat them accordingly.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Jon, again, thank you for taking the time out to have a conversation with me today. Really appreciate it. You mentioned earlier your books, so tell us where we can find those and whatever else you want us to know to contact you.
Sure. Yeah. The Clear and Complete Guide to AccountBased Experience. As I said, I think it's worth reading. It's not like a hard read. I wrote it to really be flippable almost. You pick it up, read a couple pages, you learn something, put it down, pick it up again another time. You can grab that at demandbase.com/guide. And as I said, just an email, and don't worry, we won't start calling you. And then, demandbase.com/dbtv is a great place for all these videos. And if you've heard the podcast and want to kind of connect with me directly, shoot me a note on LinkedIn and just mention that you heard the podcast so I kind of have some connection.
All right. Awesome. And also thanks for the listeners. If you're listening to the podcast and also want to see Jon and I, video of the podcast and others will be available in the podcast section of contentmonster.com. Again, Jon, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Business of Marketing podcast, a show brought to you by ContentMonster.com, the producer of B2B digital marketing content. Show notes can be found on ContentMonster.com, as well as aleejudge.com. To continue the conversation, be sure to follow the podcast on your favorite podcast platform.